Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Prospect Charter School's Algebra 1 course. Today we're going to be going over section 2.9%. Now, when I was going through my master's degree program and trying to figure out how to be a better teacher, one of the things that I did is I asked a bunch of businesses, what do you need your students or what do you want your employees to know when they start to work for you as far as math is concerned? And the overwhelming majority always said decimals, percents, and fractions. Well, today we're going to be going over percents. This is one of the most important aspects of being able to do business level math. So, what is a percent? Well, we can look at the word per and then cent. If you know Latin, you know that cent means 100. Century means 100. Centurion means that they are 1 out of 100. Per means for each one. For each. So basically it's saying for each 100. A percent is a ratio per 100. A percent is an amount per 100. I'm going to call it an amount per 100. An amount per 100. So the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to convert between fractions and percents. So for an example, if I saw 35%, how would I turn that into a fraction? Well, 35%, you would say it would be 35 per cent or century or 100. And then of course we reduce. They're both divisible by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 10 divided by 5 is 20. Or 100 divided by 5 is 20. So we have 7 over 20 for 35%. What about 10%? Well, that would be 10 per 100, which is 1 over 10. What about something like 50%? I think you guys already know this one. That's 50 over 100, which is 1 over 2. So what we really want to do is, on top of being able to convert it into fraction mode, is also turn it into decimal mode. So for decimal mode, it's actually even easier. It's just like crazy easy to do percents into decimals. Let's say for a moment that we have 20% and we want to turn that into a decimal. The first thing that we do is rewrite 20 and then we put a little decimal mark at the end of our whole numbers. And then the percent means that we're dividing by 100. Dividing by 100 means that we take this little decimal place and we move it 2 spaces to the left. So 20% would really be 0.20. What about 35%? From our previous example, well, decimal would move 1, 2 spaces. That'd be 0.35, right? Because if we move it 2 spaces to the right, we would get 35%. And what about 50%? Well, again, we rewrite it as 50 with our little dot, move it 2 spaces over, and that's 0.50. What about something really off, like 2%? So for an example, sometimes you'll notice that your hydrogen peroxide says 2% actual hydrogen peroxide, 98% water. Well, 2%. So how much is that? Well, I would write down my 2, right? And I have my little decimal place. Now I need to move it over to the left 2 spaces. Notice how there's an empty space here. To represent an empty space, we use the number 0. So this turns into 0.02. And what if we have like a decimal for a percent? What if we have like 0.015%. Well, to convert that into a decimal, we rewrite our percent, and then we take our decimal point and we move it over 2 spaces. Notice now I have 2 empty spaces, which I fill with zeros. So this would really become 0.00015. All right, and as with anything in math, we need to be able to go both ways. So we need to be able to convert from a decimal to a percent. That's fun. Converting from a decimal to a percent is really, really easy. For an example, if I have 0.35, in previous times in converting from percent to decimal, we move to the left. Well, now we just take the same thing, and move it to the right. Let's say we had 0.04. Well, again, we move it 2 spaces to the right. That would be 4%. What if we have 1.285? Well, to convert it, we would again move the decimal place over to the right, and we get 128.5%. Really, really easy stuff. Just move the decimal a few spaces over. And now for the part that isn't so easy. What about fractions to percents? This is the hardest one. One, you could try memorizing the most common fractions to percents, but there are an infinite number of fractions out there. So it would be better if we knew how to convert it rather than trying to memorize an infinite number of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you some stuff that you should know, and I'm going to have you practice it because I think that it gets lost because a lot of people start relying on these things instead of their brain. So let's say for a moment that I have a simple fraction, 1/4, and I want to turn that into a percent. Those that haven't memorized will automatically be saying, Mr. O'Neill, it's 25%, we're done. And I'm like, what did I just say about memorizing? Do you really want to memorize an infinite number of things? I don't. So here's our method. Our first step is to turn it into long division. So step 1, turn it into long division. We have 1 being divided by 4. And in our long division, we say, how many times does 4 go into 1? And the answer to that question is none. So we put a 0 there. And normally we'd be done, but we still need to turn it into a percent. So what we do is we put a little decimal spot right after the first whole number. And then we can put a 0 there. And we can continue with our division. What times 4 gives us 10? Well, nothing, but something gets us close, and that would be 2. 2 times 4 is 8. I then subtract the 8 and then 1.0. So 10 minus 8 is 2, so I have 2 left over. Since I still have a remainder, I repeat the process. I place another 0 behind the previous one. I bring that 0 down, and now I ask the same question. What times 4 can get me to 20? And the answer to that is 5. 5 times 4 is 20. I then subtract. I have nothing left. I have 0 remainder. Now I have a decimal. And I know what you're saying, but Mr. O'Neill, we were going after percents. Well, sometimes you got to take more than one step to do a certain thing. For an example, when you're driving, you have to just do more than just say you're driving. You have to get in the car, you have to look around, you have to adjust your mirrors, you have to make sure that you can reach all of your controls, you have to turn the vehicle on, and then you can start moving it. So there's a lot to it. Oh, and don't forget your seatbelt. So there's a lot to it. So in this case, we can't go directly from fraction to percent unless you have it memorized. But who wants to memorize an infinite number of things? I don't. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to go from a fraction to a decimal, and then from the decimal to the percent. So I have a decimal of 0.25. To turn it into a percent, I move it 2 spaces to the right, and I get 25%, which is the exact same thing that we blurted out earlier. So that's only one example. I think we need to have more. We have to be able to see this again to see that we're going from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. So let's do one more. Excuse me. Let's do one more, and then we will move on to the next portion of this particular lesson. Let's say that I have 3/7, and I need to turn that into a percent. Step 1, turn it into long division. So 3/7 is really 3 being divided by 7. Well, I can't do 3 into 7 directly, so what I have to do, put a decimal point, put a 0. Put a decimal point up here. Now, how many times does 7 go into 30? 4. 4 times 7 is 28. I subtract. And now I have 2, so I do another 0. How many times does 7 go into 40? Well, it doesn't. I would say 3, but that's 21, so it's got to be 2. 2 times 7 is 14. New 0. How many times does 7 go into 60? Well, 10 times would give us 70, so 9 times would give us 63, so 8 times would give us 56. Another 0. How many times does 7 go into 40? Well, 5 times would give me 35, 6 times would give me 42, so it would have to be 5. 5 times 7 is 35. And now I've got 5 down there, so how many times does 7 go into 50? 7 times 7 is 49. So that's really close. And at this point, we're like, Mr. O'Neill, when will this ever end? And the answer to that question is, it won't. This is one of the reasons why Mr. O'Neill says that fractions are friends and decimals are demons. Because a fraction of 3/7 is super easy to work with. A decimal of 0.042857 and then whatever the next thing is going to be isn't going to be so nice. So what I would do is realize that I can only get an estimation. I can't get an exact number because this decimal is never going to end. It's going to go on for all eternity. In fact, if I plug it into my calculator and let my calculator do the work for me, you can see it goes for a very long time. I'm not going to count all of this. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring a cutoff. I'm going to cut it off right there. And my percent, I'm going to move this 2 spaces over, and I'm going to get 42.9% because I have to round because I'm not going to an exact number. So I would say this is approximately 42.9%. So yet again, another reason why fractions are better than anything else out there once you get used to them. All right, with that out of the way, it's now time to figure some cool things out. So sometimes we're going to be asked questions like, what percent of 60 is 15? What percent of 60 is 15? Well, we already know that percent means a part per 100. So now what we're going to be looking at is the ratio that they create. Since I'm asking for what the percent is, I'm going to put the percent up there. So let me think about this for a minute. We're looking at like 15 over 60, and we're trying to convert that into a percent. So looking at the words, it looks like is goes over of, and then percent goes over 100. So if I'm doing this and I want to make a nice rule of thumb, I would write down, quote, is, quote, over of is equal to percent over 100. So it's asking for what the percent is, so I put an X in there, and then I do is over of. Is related to the 15. Of is the 60. Now the numbers here are going to be huge, so I want to reduce. So 15 and 50 both have, 15 and 60 both have 5 in common. So that would be 3 over 60 divided by 12. Oh, 3 over 12, that's 1/4. So I have x over 100 is equal to 1 over 4. We can then cross multiply. 4x is equal to 100. X is equal to 25. So I would say 15 is 25% of 60. And that would be my answer. So what I'm looking for on these is this nice little ratio. It's a good rule of thumb to go by. It's better to understand than it is to just go by rules of thumb all the time. But this will help. This will definitely help for a long time. All right, let's look at another one of those. Let's say for a moment that we are told that 40 is 0.08% of what number? Well, that's going to be a really big one. Mainly because our percent is so tiny, and I know that we're going to be dividing by that, and it's going to be a huge number. So I'm probably going to have to use my calculator on this one. But again, I'm going to go back to that is over of is equal to percent over 100. So percent over 100, 0.08% over 100 has to be is over of. Well, the is, I think, is associated with the 40. So I'd say 40 over the number that I'm looking for. And now I do the arithmetic. Okay, so I got 0.08x is equal to 4,000. I then divide by 0.08. So I'm going to use my handy dandy calculator for this. 4,000 divided by 0.08, and that gives me, wow, 50 grand. X is 50,000. Super huge number. But, you know, that's what calculators are for us. When the numbers get too big to hold in your head, you may use a calculator. That's probably the best use for them. And then there's the caret system. Caret is to determine how pure an object is. So an example, gold. You hear about 10 karat gold, 12 karat gold, 14 karat gold, etc. And what the caret does is it sets it to per 24. Meaning that 24 karat gold is 100% gold. I would not recommend 24 karat gold for jewelry mainly because gold is very soft and malleable and scratches super easy. And if you've got a ring on and you're doing something and it scratches and bends and twists and stuff really easily, it's actually a safety hazard. So I definitely recommend not getting 24 karat gold. 14 karat gold, on the other hand, is just fine. Now, what 14 karat gold means is that you have 14 parts gold for 10 parts other things. Remember, it has to add up to 24 per 24. So if we have 14 karat gold, 14 of it is gold and 10 is other stuff. So what percent is that? What percent gold is 14 karat gold? Well, once again, we're going to do that nice little ratio. We have percent over 100 equal to the number of parts we have, or the is, which is 14, over of, which is 24. Once again, I really like reducing before I start trying to multiply. So I'm going to keep that x over 100 because there's not much I can do there. The 14 and the 24 are both even, so I divide them both by 2, and I get 7 over 12. I can't reduce any further, so I'm going to, of course, cross multiply. So I now have, if my pen will write, there we go. I have 12x is equal to 700. Well, 12 and 700 are both even, so I divide them both by 2. Now I have 6x is equal to 350, still divisible by 2. 3x is equal to, what is 350 divided by 2? 175. And, 7 plus 5 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So they're not divisible by 3. So at this point, I have two choices. I can either do long division to find out the percentage, or I can use my handy-dandy calculator. And I'm going to use my handy-dandy calculator. I'm going to do 175 divided by 3. And that gives me 58 and then a whole bunch of 3's afterwards. So x, or the percent, is 58.3%